Perfect. We'll start with quite a few folks here. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is one of a few webinars that we will be doing on a few things on the topic of generative AI and automation and how these things work together. With me today, I have Vinu. Vinu is one of our exceptional automation technical leads here at Accelirate. For those who don't know Vinu, he's also a MVP in the local community of automation enthusiasts. He's well known. My name is Ahmed Zaidi. I'm your host today. I'm the CEO and Chief Automation Officer at Accelirate. We figured everybody's been talking about LLMs, and everybody's been talking about GPT. We figured our focus as Accelirate, which is a process automation services firm, our core focus is process automation. We figured we talked about how generative AI technologies like GPT and LLMs are being used in automation, and very specifically today's webinar will focus on some of the RPA integrations. So without further ado, I'm just going to go through set some of the stage for our conversation, and at the end, we promise this to be a practical demo where you will see how things are done. So we'll go through into that. So if you think about the traditional RPA use cases, they were all centered around, and this is something that anybody who's been doing RPA knows, standard readable electronic inputs, rules-based processes with low exception rates. You have high volume, lots of people working on it. Generally speaking, stable processes. I think that the overarching theme was things don't change. They're structured, and there's structured data, and there's large volumes. This was what the traditional RPA world was geared towards when it first started, right? So then you started getting into AI augmentation of process within process automation within the RPA world, and what that enabled. So just to frame what AI enabled was cases where uncertainty was sort of a factor, where the outcome is really just a probability. What is the expected default rate on a portfolio of loans or something like that? Doing sort of inventory forecasts, where these things are not just very hard numbers, they're generally a probability, right? Or you have high variability of factors that may determine a decision, where you can't determine that decision just through manual rules, right? You can't just say, here's the rule, if this, then that, do something. And AI and machine learning was really good at looking at a lot of factors, looking at a lot of variables, looking at a lot of inputs, and actually creating sort of a rule based on that information. So high variability use cases started to come in, things like looking at resumes and trying to figure out what they might have, or language translations and things like that. The other big thing that AI enabled really was unstructured data, right? So unstructured data, whether that be through natural language processing and looking at emails and documents and articles, or whether that be speech to text, or those type of video analysis or image analysis and things like that, where you couldn't really, there wasn't rules for it. You had to do some sort of AI and machine learning models. And these sort of AI-enabled services augmented the automation landscape, the automation purview of what you could automate. And these services were all sort of plugged into your traditional RPA bots, and they augmented them. However, with AI implementations came a few different things, right? So you have unstructured data sources. You have to actually get them to a state where either they're machine readable, if you have image of documents, you have to OCR them. If you have speech, if you have audio files, you may have to actually use some speech to text type things to actually get them into text so you can analyze that text, so on and so forth. The big thing that all AI implementations, generally speaking, within the process automation space really had were time-consuming data labeling exercises, whether that be image processing, right? So we always go through, I always give this example of, if you wanted a machine learning model to figure out whether something is a cat or not, you showed it a lot of pictures of cats and dogs and maybe not cats and say, this is cat and this is not a cat. This is a cat, this is not a cat. And then the machine learning model, after having enough samples, would figure out how to spot a cat in a image, right? Very similarly, if you have documents, what you would end up doing is, if you read the article that I wrote a few days ago, you would label a lot of the data and say, this is the outcome of this particular case. That's one type of labeling. Or you might take documents and say, this field corresponds to this data element, so on and so forth. So all that was really time consuming, right? And then, it is time consuming, it still happens today, right? So and then what you also have is, just from a training perspective and the model development perspective, you had to really worry about, what is the sample size? How many samples do I train on? When will the model be good enough to actually figure out that the model has been trained? You had to worry about, am I overtraining it on a particular type of sample, particular type of documents, or a particular type of image, or a particular. So those are all sort of model development complexity. You would train it, you would run it, you would test it, it would spit out some results, and then you would have to go back and tweak parameters to actually do a lot of that model development complexity. And then at the end of it, the things that were challenging with AI implementations, again, language understanding and generation has always been a challenging thing. So although NLP models exist and they work pretty well, right, which is natural language processing models. However, there were always the generation of natural language, the generation understanding of language was always challenging. Enter, the GPT era, right? Chat GPT, LLMs, whatever you want to call it these days. We'll refer to it as GPT just for familiarity's sake in this particular thing. However, this model changed AI implementations. Of course, another type of AI implementation. It really changed how AI was being implemented within a particular automation or an industry. The models seem to understand unstructured data because they've been trained on so much data that they seem to understand unstructured data, whether it be images, whether it be documents, whether it be OCR extracts of documents. People have tried all sorts of things, and they're amazed at the ability of these LLMs and GPT models to be able to understand that data, which is really interesting, right? The understanding is an interesting word. I always talk about this. If you think about OCR and some of the other, the ability to detect text in a particular position is not really understanding. Understanding really means what NLP models tried to do, like looking at a line of text and trying to figure out what is the sentiment of it. That's really understanding. And the interesting thing that we've seen, and a lot of folks have been amazed at, is how these LLMs and GPT models understand the data that is being fed into it, which is very interesting. A big thing that's sort of been eliminated is the training of the model. Now, tweaking of the model, feeding it more context to be more accurate, all of those things are definitely there, right? Those things are there. However, the model training has been sort of eliminated in this new era of using LLMs and GPTs, which is interesting. Of course, you could train your own LLM. Apparently, extremely expensive, right? Because of the processing power needed and the data that's needed, and so on and so forth. However, it's possible. Most folks who implement GPT or generative AI technology do not train their own models. They feed it extra context. They fine tune the models. They will fine tune parameters going into the model to get better results. However, they don't train the model. And of course, we've seen it over and over and over again. We all play with it every day. I ask it to write poems. I ask it to generate images. I ask it to write emails, so on and so forth. It has exceptional language understanding, which opens up a very broad sort of landscape of things that you could do with it, right? You could actually ask it to write an email nicely or harshly or with compassion and things like that. So this sort of generation of language and understanding, these are exceptional skills that we now have at our behest to be able to use within various use cases that we have within our organizations. So now that we have all these capabilities, generally speaking, what we're seeing in automation, what you could do is you have this natural language. Generally speaking, 9 out of 10 times, we have these two use cases, documents and natural language. Of course, there are other use cases such as image recognition and image analysis and video analysis and things like that. We'll go into that in later stages, but today we want to talk a little bit about documents and natural language. A exec from Google once at a conference said, "I could have the best AI. However, once I get the results out of that model or that technology or that AI model, it has to be actioned upon. At the end of the day, you have to action upon that." So one of the things that you do is you take the documents, you process them using this beautiful new technology they will have in generative AI, and then take the results from that and action it using an RPA bot. The other interesting thing that's coming up that we're seeing is interaction with an intelligent assistant that can look at various parts of your data and actually help you. So this is the real interesting productivity use case that we're seeing, where folks are able to now interact with unstructured data in ways that they were not able to in the past, right? So they're able to look at analyze the qualitative analysis of your data can be done much faster using this technology than you would have in the past. And we'll go through some of that. We'll show you some use cases and some products that are doing that. Just as a note of logistics, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question and answer session, question and answer window on Zoom on the webinar. We'll get to them as soon as we can. So getting back to actioning and interaction, how do we, what are the key considerations? I think we all talk about, as soon as new technology comes in, there are always the gotchas, right? Where are the gotchas? I think, I'm not really talking about how well the technology works just yet, right? Hallucinations, and it might be accurate, not accurate. Let's put that aside for a few seconds, because that happens in anything. I would consider, you may have bugs within your code and things like that, right? So those type of things happen everywhere. From a implementation and key considerations of whether you're allowed to use it or not, and what are the implications of using it, I think one of the big things that everybody's been talking about is data security. Of course, all the data security parameters that you have and the controls that you have in place for your systems today need to be implemented. you need to also make sure that, because the primary interface to LLMs and generative AI technologies is prompts, right? You need to make sure that you are protecting how prompts are actually being sent out, and then there's no data in those prompts that could cause a data security breach, right? We've all heard the story about Samsung engineers posting some proprietary code in ChatGPT sort of prompt. So data security is something that you got to worry about. How do you make sure that all the data security controls that you have in place continue to be in place? Now, I think with the advent of Azure providing you an OpenAI API service, it makes it very similar to what you do consuming other Microsoft services, where you put security controls in place before data is sent to those services, and you have a lot of that security model in place. But that's something to think about. The other thing to think about really has been compliance and regulatory concerns, right? There are places where, of course, and that was true even with what we now call traditional AI implementations of models, right? If you're making a decision using an AI model, you might have regulators that might ask you to prove why you made that decision. So you need to make sure that you have a way to figure out how that decision was made. Or you may have cases where you might have to have a human from a compliance and regulatory perspective validate something, or actually see the decision being stamped by someone, right? So when you have something like that, you need to make sure that that those compliance and regulatory concerns are actually addressed, thought through before you start the implementation. Of course, everybody's been talking about ethical implementations. What are the ethical implications of having a robot look at, or a non-human pretend to be a human, right? So again, you have to think through those things, figure out how you want to represent what you're presenting, how much do you want to divulge around how this response is being produced, whether you want to make sure that this was an automated response or not an automated response, so on and so forth. There are other ethical implications of possible biases, possible non-acceptable responses. Of course, the powers that be that are generating these large language models are doing putting a lot of controls in place to be able to prevent that, but it keeps happening. I see a question from someone. It would be great if you could also just write your name for the in the question and answer this way I know who it is. Hi, Philip. Perfect. I think, look, as far as Bing goes, they're so far down in the search space. There's nothing but upside for them. So I think, in fact, it is really interesting. I really want to see where that goes. I am a big fan of Bing for Work. If you guys haven't used this and you guys are Office 365, go bing.com/work, and it actually gives you a search really in your within your own Office 365 tenant. I love it. However, in my opinion, Philip, I think both these things have a huge potential and an upside. I think it's still a little early, things like Copilot, and we're seeing a lot of productivity gains with all of these things, especially even in the coding space, right? I think developers are going to be tremendously productive in the coming years. So my thoughts are that these things Microsoft's probably going to do really well with these things. All right. moving on to a little bit of, let's get into the practicality of how you do it, and we'll talk through some of this stuff. I think generally speaking, not much different than once you understand what the capabilities are, talk to folks, do your research. There's a lot of material out there. You can identify some pilot use cases on what you want to do. The implementation sort of cycle is pretty much similar to what you might do. However, from a coding perspective, there's a lot more integration than rules coding, of course, and then pre-processing, post-processing. Data preparation is a big step. When you talk about data preparation, it's not just getting the files from wherever they are into a place where it can be fed to something. We will spend a little bit of time in further series on vector databases and how they and embeddings that provide more context to large language models to be able to be more accurate and so on and so forth. So that all goes into your data preparation stage. I use this, sentence, use this statement quite often. I think natural language is going to be the next programming language. So, and the role of prompt engineering is becoming more and more prominent because really from a large language model interaction perspective, generative AI interaction perspective, there's a lot of lot of variability depending upon what prompts you use. So you have to have some step of prompt engineering to actually figure out what prompts work, what prompts give you the right answers in the right formats that you want. Then there's testing and deployment, usual stuff. You test your stuff, you deploy it. There is going to be a monitoring and maintenance need. Of course, everybody's in such early stages of it, but you want to think about, how am I going to monitor what's happening? What type of reporting do we need? What type of maintenance needs will we have? What type of infrastructure, architectures? What type of support needs will I have for this implementation? I think that's very important. However, you do all of that stuff for everything anyways. What is really, really, really important at the base layer is having a governance and compliance practice that will govern everything that you do with generative AI. I think that is tremendously important. It is extremely important to understand what the governance is going to be and include that in the full requirements and the development and the implementation phase. And we talked a little bit about those concerns early on. I think that is extremely important. All right, so we're going to go into the demo phase of the webinar. I am going to hand it over to my good friend Vino here, who's going to talk about. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some. We're going to show you some cool stuff with RPA and GPT, and then we're going to talk a little. Then we're going to show you some cool stuff with how you can interact with unstructured data. So take it away, Vino.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ahmed. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay.
While he's setting up, the first use case really is around RPA, a customer service bot that looks at emails and does that, does some analysis based on using GPT, and then actions upon it using RPA, and then we have some other stuff as well. Vinu, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. First, let us try to build a simple automation with GPT. So right on the screen, you can see Studio X. So this is one of the IDE. If you are a citizen developer or a business user, you can just come here and you can use the ready-made activities available, and you can just build your automation. So right now, I can just show you how you can build an automation by integrating with GPT. So for very first thing, which you have to need to do is you need to have this OpenAI activities. If you create a new project, you may have to go with manage packages, search for OpenAI, and you may get two different activities. One is from Azure OpenAI, and next one is OpenAI. I already have this installed. So the very first thing, I'm going to do a simple automation here. First, I'm going to ask for a prompt from an user. I'm going to open this.
Yeah, as we were practicing this the other day, we figured before we go into the automation, I think it's good for everyone to see how easy both Microsoft and UiPath or other services have made it to interact with these services, right? So it's very simple and easy. What Vino's showing you here is a great example of how easily you can enable the interaction with OpenAI. Now, it's both good and bad, right? So it's because it's so easy, it can be done very quickly. However, you need to consider all the other things that we talked about before you can start implementing these.
Yep. I'm going to say a prompt here, text builder, and I'm going to use the information that is coming from that input dialog. The last thing is I need to store this into one variable. So I can just go with the top generated text. I'll be creating a variable which is of type text, and I can just name it response from GPT. And I'll be using that variable here to storing the result. And finally, I'll be just showing that uh, generated response from GPT back to the user. I'll create a message box, use the response from GPT. That's it. So you don't need to do any kind of complex thing. All you have to do is you can use the ready-made activities available, and you can build your automation for your own purpose, right? And I'm going to run this workflow which I've created. Okay, it's asking me for a prompt. I can say to write a simple email to my boss asking for a hike. Even in fact, I can ask for 100% hike.
Oh, thank you.
So Ahmed, I'm going to send this back to you, and we can have the discussion after this webinar.
I like his prompt. I like it. I like his.
Okay, here it is. So I got an email draft readily available, and I'm going to send this to Ahmed. Okay. So that's what to show you how quickly and how easily you can build an automation right in place. So now you can do more than this. You can build more than a product for an end-to-end use case. So right now I'm opening up a Studio Web. And for the people who are not aware of Studio Web, it is completely a browser-based IDE. You don't have to set up anything. You don't have to install anything. All you have to sign up for an account and you are ready to go. You have a browser and you can build automation, end-to-end automation for your use case. And it's pretty much simple. You don't need to write any piece of code. All the activities readily available. If you want to connect to a different source system, any third-party system, you have that connectors, you have that pre-built activities readily available. So right now what I have here is I'm trying to automate an entire customer support use case. So it starts from reading your all the emails in a particular shared inbox. Then it categorizes them. And by the way, this is for a saving account for a particular bank. So it then reads each of the email requests. It then categorizes them, right? For instance, here I took like three different categories. It will categorize them into either three of them, and into each one of them, I'm using GPT prompts to perform my further action. So the very first thing, I'm using a GPT prompt first to get the account number from that request, right? Now, here is one important thing. If you're sending out a prompt for a particular request, you have to do a particular prompt engineering, right? So that you get a output in a specific format, so that it is very much easy for you to do the kind of post processing. So for that, I've just included a prompt here to extract the account number and just instructing GPT to not include any other further information to my output. So if the account number is not there, I'm just instructing that to just have as NA, right? And if it is not provided, I'm going to write an email back to the user asking for that account number. And if everything is there, I'm going to do the further action. First of, in case it does the email classification, it categorize the email into either of the different categories, and whatever categories I want, I can just specify them here. And after that, it gets into a different category. Now, few things I would just want to highlight, right? For instance, if it is a transactional issue, if I'm writing an email, let's say if a customer is writing an email to customer support, it can be because of any reason, right? It can be because the priority is very much high. Maybe someone has, so there is some suspicious activity, someone has withdrawn a particular amount, and that needs to be treated on a very high priority basis. So I need to define the priority level. For that, I can just use GPT for defining the priority by sending a prompt. And even in fact, if I want to create a ticket in some particular source system, let's say here I'm creating a ticket in Jira. So the Jira instance won't allow to write a summary more than 250 characters. So I need to create a summary which will include all the specific action that is required. And also, it is not more than 250 characters. So all that thing, you just need to make sure you're setting the right prompt, and so that you can, get the absolute response. So in this case, we are getting the summary, we are doing the priority of a particular request, and all that information that is coming from a GPT, I'm just feeding that out or creating a Jira instance ticket. And imagine building this traditionally, how difficult it will be, right? But right now it is as simple as anything. You can create this entire use case within a span of 30 minutes. You have all the activities available. You just have to configure them, send the right prompts, get the answer, and send it back to the source system. So that is just one example, and couple of other thing. Obviously, an email can be for getting an account information, right? It can be generating an account statement based on some duration, and for that also, you can use GPT for getting and understanding the sentiment of the particular email. Then you're using your RPA in process to fetch that information from a source system. It can be an database, or it can be a different application where you're going through, putting the required filters, getting the information back, and sending the response. And even in fact, more than that, let's say if I want to update a particular information back to my source system, right? So I may need to know what are the entities I need to update, and to what value I need to update that, right? So you can cater such a request as well. All you have to do is you send the right prompt, and again, you get all the response back. You can store it into some common spreadsheet, and it can be used as a performer for a kind of different bot, to go to a targeted system and just fill that information. So I have the entire automation in place, and obviously you can see how quickly and easily it was. For the sake of the timing, I've just pre-recorded the entire execution, so I may not take much of your time. So I'm just going to directly go and just play it out.
Vino was scared of the ghost of the demo. I call it the ghost of the demo.
Yeah.
It shows up as soon as you start the word demo.
Yeah. So right in the screen, you can see the shared email box, which has all the requests coming up. Some of them can be for a transactional issue. Some of them can be requesting for certain information. And down there, you can see different folders to which that email is to be categorized.
Just for everyone's sake, for this portion of it, we're using UiPath as the RPA platform, and this is Studio Web. It's running on a cloud robot, so there's not, everything is cloud-based here. Nothing sort of on any machine locally.
Yep. And that's again a benefit, right? You don't need to set up any robots. You don't need to configure any infrastructure, right? So down there, you can see all the long messages through which we can see the automation is running perfectly.
So you can see that you have requests that are, so just so everyone understands, the way to have done this in the past would have been to take all of these things, identify what you would call entities within a particular natural language input, and say, you know, this is an account number, this is phone number, this is address, this is all these things that you would identify specifically for extraction, and you would have a long-winded sort of labeling sessions and this and that to be able to do this. And then, you know, just like that email that you just saw, I would like to update my account number to blah, 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 account number this to address. So these entities would be extracted and then actioned upon. The implementation cycle on that was fairly long because you'd have to do a lot of labeling, right? That was sort of, that's a bane of any machine learning project. I think the first thing that everyone asks is, how much labeling do I need to do? How many samples do I need to do? Who's going to do the labeling, so on and so forth. And in this particular case, when you didn't do any labeling of anything, right, the model kind of understands these the most commonly used entities, if you may, and then it was able to say, hey, this is the account number in this particular text, and this is the and it's asking for an update to an address, and then it knows the address. Now we can start going further and start asking to parse various parts of the email, but it also is looking at some of the sentiment in the emails to actually figure out what the priority might be for this, right? This is how we just put in a prompt to say prioritize it, but one of the emails says this is an urgent thing. So as this one email says, this is urgently need funds to complete it, put a high priority on that. You could use it to detect sentiment and actually do fine sort of sentiment in terms of, you know, is this really angry? Is this really happy? Is this positive, negative, so on and so forth, which of course other models exist to do that. However, just the implementation cycles were much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Very great point. So right now the bot finished the execution and we can see the response has been sent back to the user. And whichever had a transactional issue, it actually created a ticket in Jira, which I'll be showing it in a few moments. And whichever needed some particular account update, it added to a specific location in place where the other bot can pick it up and can do that post processing. And this is my common shared email box. And we can see this email, right, which is particularly related to the transactional issue, right? One can be, this one, you can see it is based on the withdrawal, which is not reflecting in a particular bank account. And the other two,
Guys, sorry.
yeah, no problem. So the other two, the account updates, which are gonna be, yeah, this is with regards to, getting the address updated to a particular saving account. And it classified it perfectly. And the other two here is getting particular account statement and knowing the loan details that is applicable. And finally, which all had the transactional issue, it came to the Jira and it created the incident ticket. And what I want to highlight here is the summary that you can see on the screen, right? It created a perfect summary that has captured all the perfect entities out, right? So let's say in this particular case, yeah. So it had captured all the particular entities like the amount debited and the date on which it happened, so that it's very much easy for any user to recognize. And more than that, it actually defined the priority. Since it is an ATM withdrawal and the amount is not reflecting in account, so it is treated as a very high priority request. And more than that, you can actually use GPT as well to route it to a specific user group, right? So you can categorize this even one level further, and you can say since it is belong to a particular ATM withdrawal, you can actually route it to a specific ATM specific group that takes care of the ATM request. And let's say if it is based on some current account related issue, you can actually route it to a different user groups. The last one, which is regarding to the account updates. And we can see here, it is for updating a particular account with the right address. And as we come to this place under this, and you can see, it captured the right entities that need to be updated and also to what value need to be updated, right? So traditionally, if you want to do this, obviously you needed to set up all the ML models in place. You have to do all that kind of labeling task, which takes up weeks of efforts. Right now, you actually eliminated them. And the one final thing, there was a request which asked for getting the bank statement for the last 3 months. Yeah, this request right there. And finally, here we can see the bot was able to get into the source system, um, take all the relevant filter criteria, and was able to send the attached bank statement.
I think it'd be good to see um, some of the prompts that you used here.
Yep, sure. And go back to the studio web. And let's say, I just want to summarize the entire information out from that particular transactional issue. You can send some prompts stating that, could you just summarize everything into one liner so that it doesn't exceeds 255 characters. And one more thing here, in Jira, it doesn't support sending a new line character, right? You may get an issue with that. So I'm also informing here to not include any new line character. And also to strictly give my account in a specific format, issue summary. The reason is because I can do some post processing after that, where I can just look into any particular text that is coming after issue summary. I can capture that, and I can just put that into Jira. And more than that, there was a few specific place where I'm capturing the start date and the end date, right? So right here, I'm setting a prompt for getting the start date. You can just open it here, and I'm asking for GPT for considering today's date and just give me the start date of a particular request, right? Because the request that you had seen earlier, it just had the keyword called, just extract the account statement for the last 3 months, right? And we need to give a kind of reference. Okay, consider today's date. From today's date, consider whatever it's the start date. So sending the right prompt, you may be able to get the right response out. And also you can notice down here, if the GPT is not able to predict the start date, maybe because it is not given in the email body, or maybe it is not there, right? I'm just asking it to put NA so that I can do some post processing after that. Yep. So the next, I have a very interesting thing to show, and which is around documents. So
Yeah.
if anyone
So
has any questions.
yeah, if you have any questions, I saw a few questions. I answered one of them. Both Philip and Fabio had a few questions. I answered both of them. This was sort of one of your, how you can quickly implement some of these things. So again, I think for the most part, Venus spent a lot of time in trying to make sure that he had the right prompts with the right, you know, outputs and all of that. So I think coding wasn't as problematic. Again, less time spent on that than you would have spent on training a model to figure out a lot of the things that it actually figured out of the box, which is the amazing part, right? I think we all continue to be fairly impressed with the amount of understanding. Again, look, I think making sure that you test it on a big enough data set and continue to monitor the outputs is important. I think one of the things that gets lost really, and I would warn everyone again on this, we go through this with our normal automations, is there is an expectation of perfection from machines. We have looked at over and over use cases where our models make less mistakes or are less accurate, or are more accurate than humans, yet they get scrutinized more because a machine has there's an expectation of perfection from the machine. So uh, you know, when you have undeterministic sort of models where you're looking at answers that are not really a clear black or white, or something needs to be discerned or something needs to be understood, humans also make mistakes, right? So it's always good to make sure that you have that in mind as you're implementing these. Go ahead, Bina.
Yeah, right now we saw how we can build an automation in place, and even in fact, right now what we had seen, it can run unattended as well. The next thing is more like a pattern where you want to use GPT more like for your day-to-day life, right? More today, you have a specific use case with you, and but you want to run it through at a real time, more like an assistant, more like an attended use case. For that, we have an intelligent processing system here, and this is one of a product that I liked so far. And even OpenBots, this is OpenBots actually. It is a leader in IDP. It is a leader in RPA space. They are doing pretty much great job. And when it comes to the document, the IDP use case, they've actually been the leaders of this. They are doing exceptional job. And right now I'm going to show what are the cool things that you can do readily with OpenBots documents. And they have a direct integration with GPT, which makes things a lot more easier, right? You can completely solve your unattended and unstructured use cases with OpenBorders documents. So it is very much straightforward. All you need to do is come here, upload the document that you want to extract your information from, and just that's it. And the later part, you will be seeing your documents here. And for this part of this demo, I have a couple of documents. I have one is the lease agreement. And we all know that the lease agreement is completely unstructured, right? And to define an entity relationship here, it is far more difficult than anything, right? And building a model for a lease agreement, it's very much challenging because the structure and the nature of a particular information can vary across all the documents. But here we have a system that is readily able to recognize them. And even in fact, on the right hand side, you can see, once I uploaded this document, it was able to readily extract all the entities right from here, right? So I can just have which of them I'm looking for, or I can just remove them. I can just edit, or I can add any new fields that I'm looking out for here, right? So in this example, more than that, this can be very much helpful if you're building up some assistant capability, right? Because OpenBots document has this very interesting things where you can ask information directly to the document, and if you want to extract the relation information out from. For instance, in this lease agreement, I just wanted to know quickly what are the different appliances that is covered in a particular lease agreement, right? So I can ask the question, what are the appliances, or I can say what are the appliances provided by the landlord?
So in this particular use case, what we're talking about really is you have the ability to sort of chat with your documents, right? So you don't have to go sifting through pages and say you're a renter's insurance underwriter and you just got this lease and you want to make sure you want to find out, what appliances should I cover and what I shouldn't, right? So on and so forth, right? For the renter, not the owner. So those are the sort of things that can. So this is the intelligent assistance use case that we think is a tremendous value for productivity, right? Um, there's a there's a there are a lot of use cases that are opening up for this very specific type of assisted use cases as opposed to true automation use cases.
Yep, absolutely. And more than that, documents can have, in this example, the lease agreement, right? It can spawn out to multiple pages. So getting through all these pages and extracting the information will be a very much tedious job, right? And as an assistant or as a business user, it may be very much challenging for you all to go through multiple pages and get the information out. For in case I wanted to know what is the pet policy that is applied for this lease, right? Even I can just wanted to ask the right prompt and you'll be able to get the information. What is the pet policy? There it is. I have all the information that I wanted to know about the pet policy. So whenever I'm moving here, I don't have any particular new request coming up, right? So um, it makes the life a lot more easier, right? So you don't have to go through multiple pages. You want to scrap the data out. And the other cool thing here is you can do multiple things out of it, which I'm going to show it in the next document. Now, more than that, extracting information from an unstructured source, you can do something more as a financial analysis on your document as well. So right now on the screen, I have a report from the last quarter from Apple, and I can do more financial level information out from this document. So you can see here, it is completely a tabular structured data. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask, what is the net income growth between the two periods in the report? Okay, there it is. It says that between the two periods, it is minus 9.2. And if I actually calculate that, it will be right. Just to verify that fact, I can just ask one more prompt asking to provide the values of the specific reports. So what are the value of net income of the two periods? Okay, here it is. It says for April 1, it is around $54,000. And if I go, in fact, and it's absolutely right, it's 54,000. And for May, it is somewhat around 59,000. So more than that, you can actually perform all your financial level analysis here. It is not only about asking the question and getting the response. Okay, here is what the information provided in the document. You can do more like, subtracting the information or aggregating everything from a given specific report, right? And doing all the financial calculation. So you don't need to, you can actually skip all the part where you are actually having a system in place for doing the complex logical processing. You can ask whatever you want here from this prompt and you'll be able to get the response back. And the other cool thing here, I wanted to show, more than that, you can actually extract your tabular level data, but just clicking here and I can just highlight here which table or data I want, and there it is. I have this data in place. Now I can actually export it into Excel. And if I want to do
And I
some
could
Excel
use this
post,
for so many use cases. I hate it when people send me a table in a picture.
yeah. So right now you can do more than that, right? In fact, you can analyze the sentiment. Let's say if you're dealing more with an invoice, more with invoices or things like that, where it has a QR code, you can extract that QR code readily available from here. Yeah, so there is a lot more interesting features readily available here.
Yeah, but I think the big thing here is the integration of the generative AI capabilities have really, so what we've been seeing is you really, the time to implement goes down pretty fast, right? So that's one thing that you can extract data very quickly. This document assistant portion of it, and actually really interestingly, I saw some demos from their team the other day where they're able to take out a whole list of events in a document and actually put a timeline view of it, or an entity relationship view on, let's say, a promissory note for or a loan agreement for a syndicated loan where there's 15 lenders and 5 insurers, and for borrowers and things like that, right? So there are multiple entities involved, and what is the relationship between all of that? Those are the things that are extremely powerful. I know we're at time. I'm going to leave it out for open for a few questions. If you have any, please feel free to ask them. We really appreciate everyone's time today that you were able to come in and show. I'm going to put on the screen our email addresses, just so if you have any questions that you'd like, please feel free to send it to us or reach out to us. Oh, there you go. Sorry. Please stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more on this. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to see if they have any questions. All right. There are a couple of questions. We really appreciate it. Keen, you have a question? I will take a look at this and I'll reach out to you over email right after this. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.